It was a dark and foggy night. For the one sole figure walking through the forest, this was the last place he ever wanted to end up in. Yet, based on the black fedora hat with the blue ribbon around it, as well as the dark blue coat with black stripes, over a white button shirt and red tie, and a suitcase he carried through the aura of his horn, the light tannish brown-coated pony is what some would best describe as a fish out of water. But that's only because he was not from around these parts in Equestria, not seemingly as remote as this. Add to the fact he had a typewriter for a cutie mark on both sides of his flank, the kind that he'd work with as part of his job. All his life, he grew up in the city of Philadelphia, a business pony making a decent salary with hefty benefits. Yet he wasn't born in Philadelphia. He was actually born in the small town of Ponyville, but had moved to the city at a very young age. But on this one occasion, he decided a change of scenery was in order, and with whatever money he had in his pocket, he decided to book the first train ticket to the town he was born in. He must have fallen asleep on the way, because when he woke from his bench, he found that he had missed where he was supposed to get off and ended up at the wrong stop. He had no choice but to get off the train, bringing his belongings with him, and since there wouldn't be another train for a lengthy period of time, the pony had no choice but to walk all the way to Ponyville by hoof. He must have missed a turn or two along the way, because somehow the pony got lost in the woods, and the atmosphere at this hour made him nervous. The howls of the timber wolves crying out in the darkness only added to the tension he was feeling. Just when the pony felt he'd never find his way out, he spotted a light coming from a clearing past the trees. Drawing his way out of the woods, the pony is shocked to discover a single house a few feet from where he stood.
Strange to have a house in the middle of nowhere,
the pony thought.
Would want to live in an isolated place such as this.
The pony would have questioned it further, and in turn would have gone with his first instinct and kept walking. But the lighting shining through the seemingly empty window was very tempting, and with the night air being so cold, the woods ever so dark, even under the light, and the wildlife running around, the pony didn't have much of a choice. Still, he considered, if there's a light in the house, then surely there must be a resident inside, and perhaps they have a map.
At the very least, I do hope the owner is friendly,
the pony hoped. The pony slowly walked his way toward the house, stopping before the front door. Placing the suitcase gently on the ground, he raises his hoof and knocks on the wooden door. For a brief moment, neither an answer nor a motion could be heard. The pony waited, adjusting the collar of his shirt, and looked behind him as the wind brushed against the nearby trees. He then turns back toward the door and tries again. Creak. The pony stops before the fifth knock, as the door slowly opens. A chain on a lock keeps the door from opening fully, as a figure barely shows the side of her face, her moderate cyan eyes looking out.
Yes?
The owner asked, with a soft feminine voice.
Can I help you?
Oh, hello there.
The suited pony spoke.
I don't mean to disturb you, but I missed my stop and I kind of got lost. I was hoping perhaps you could help me?
The owner looks at the pony standing outside, then quickly shuts the door on his face. Just as it seemed the pony was being shut out, there's a commotion coming from inside. He can hear the short chain slide out, and the locks turning. A ton of locks, actually. The pony wondered how much she needed just to keep ponies out. After a few minutes, the door quickly opens as the owner reveals herself. There was no mistake that the owner was rather cute. He dared say beautiful. She had a pale, light grayish rose mane that matched her pale, light grayish gold coat. She also wore a black dress, strangely fancy, and yet to him it gave her some elegance, so he did not mind.
Oh, you poor sir,
she spoke.
You must be chilled to the bone. Don't worry. Feel free to come inside.
The pony turned around to lead the stranger, and he soon took notice of the wings tucked on her back by the opening of her dress. There was no mistake. She was not only a beautiful pony, but a Pegasus. He always liked those. It was quite a relief that the pony was being offered some shelter, though a part of him expected this house to be empty, if not haunted. Yet it was that note that made him a slight hesitant, finding it strange that this pony would invite a stranger of his caliber, without further questioning, not even asking him who he was or where he was coming from, not even where he was going. And the more he wondered, something about her reminded him of the old stories. Back in Philadelphia, when he'd spend afternoons at the coffee shop after work, he'd read his newspaper while the patrons a few tables ahead of him would be telling stories. The tourists to the city, especially, had tall tales to talk about, making claims about a vamp pony, part vampire and part pony, residing in the deepest, darkest woods, luring unsuspecting ponies to their abode, and not one of them would be seen or heard from again. They say this pony in question had brilliant amaranth eyes, her coat a darker shade of color. At least, that's how the story went. And yet, when he compared those details with this Pegasus waiting for him to come inside, not a single one matched this mysterious mare. Her skin was light, her eyes not even similar to what he was told. For all he knew, those passing tourists always had tall tales from the old country to talk about, or silly nonsense their small-town families would tell over the fire. He decided to ignore the possibility, given he was more focused on getting out of the cold night air. He soon picks up his suitcase with his aura, casually strolling inside the house, as the door closed behind him. As the pony stepped inside, he removed his fedora and unbuttoned his coat, casually placing them along the nearby coat hanger by the door, where his suitcase was leaned to. Making himself at home, the pony looked around, and in his eyes the house seemed completely normal. Nothing fancy, nor elegant, or chic, but it had this comfortable, warm, inviting feel to it. The mare led the pony further inside until he reached what appeared to be the living room, illuminated by the fireplace. The pony takes a seat by the couch, taking a deep breath, relieved to be out of the cold, dark woods. He stretched at his hooves, which were sore from all that walking, hearing the crack of his bones. He was so tired, and the couch was so comfortable. He could fall asleep right there. But after a few minutes came by, the aroma of a rich scent tickled his nose and stirred him awake. He turns to the side, and the mare appears from the kitchen, carrying a tray with a bowl and a spoon.
My apologies for the waits.
She spoke.
You must be hungry. I've prepared some dinner for you.
Gee,
The pony began.
Shh.
She hushed, placing a hoof to his lips.
You needn't thank me, good sir. In fact, I should be thanking you for coming.
Me?
Oh, yes. It gets so lonely around these parts, and I haven't had normal company in... Goodness, I don't even know how long. Oh, but please, feel free to eat. Wouldn't want it to get cold.
The stallion had more questions than he cared to admit. However, he was hungry, and noting she lived by herself, at least he was grateful that she was a gracious host, if not a slight bit crazy. As she placed the tray on the living room table, he wasted no time in digging into his food. He takes the spoon and starts slurping the contents of the bowl. After the first sip, he stopped, and noticed a rather odd taste. He turns toward the food before him, a simple bowl of soup. Tomato soup, with seasoning. He could taste the dry basil and black pepper. It was warm and creamy. He could feel the soup running down his throat. It was, he had to admit, delicious. And yet, while he was thankful to have something to eat, he noticed that apart from a single piece of bread, a slice of sourdough, which he dipped into the soup, there was nothing else. As he continued to eat, he noticed she herself just sat by at a nearby chair, with neither food to eat nor even a cup to drink.
Are you not eating?
He asked curiously.
You needn't worry for me, sir.
She answered, brushing it off.
I'm a very light eater. Have to keep up with appearances.
The answer wasn't quite what the stallion expected, but he nods understandingly and continues to eat. As he gulped down the soup, He noticed that she was staring at him, rather intensely. The stallion tried not to mind so much, yet he couldn't help but feel how awkward it felt.
I hope the food is to your liking.
The Pegasus spoke.
It's very good. Thank you.
The unicorn nodded, wiping his lips with a napkin.
I really appreciate the serving, Miss... I didn't catch your name.
Fluttershy.
She answered softly.
My name is... Fluttershy.
Miss Fluttershy. Lovely name. I really appreciate the hospitality. I didn't realize how big the woods were. Kind of spooky to be out and about someplace so secluded. No offense.
But while the cult attempted to make conversation, silence struck the air as she didn't respond. Just then, the cry of a timber wolf echoed out in the distance. Fluttershy gazed out toward the window, closed her eyes, and smiled, while the stallion looked on. Soon, one howl became a melody of multitude as a whole pack joined the swooning toward the full moon hanging over the night sky.
Listen to them.
She said in admiration.
Children of the night. Much music they make.
Yes. That's one way to look at it.
The stallion nodded.
Anyways, I was actually wondering if you happen to have a map I can borrow. Maybe to show me how to get back to the main road.
Perhaps.
And Fluttershy ended the conversation just like that. Short and to the point. Nothing much to add. The stallion was about to leave it at that, turning back to his dish when she continued.
It would be unwise to venture out in the woods at this hour. The trails are a dangerous place, especially in the middle of the night. You're welcome to stay here if you'd like.
Oh, I would hate to impose. You've been a very generous host, but oh, excuse me. I'm supposed to...
It was only after he finished his meal. The stallion noticed his stomach felt heavy, and he could barely keep his eyes open. He eyed the near-empty soup bowl, trying to focus on something he hadn't noticed before. The reasoning why the food tasted so strange.
Oh my, you seem to be sleepy.
Fluttershy spoke.
It would be best to stay here for the night. You just lie down, and I'll fetch you a warm blanket.
No, really.
The stallion yawned, trying to stay awake.
I don't want to take any more of your time. I really should be.
The stallion tried to stand up, but his legs gave way and he tumbled over, nearly crashing into the table. As he lied there on the floor, his eyes were threatening to close, and he realized he could hardly move. The stallion could hear faint words coming from her soothing voice.
There. Just relax. It'll all be over soon.
What did you put in that soup?
But she didn't answer the question. The last thing the stallion noticed, shortly before his view turned black, was a Pegasus standing over him, the black dress sweeping across the wooden floor. And when he turned to her face, he could barely see a devilish smile revealing fangs. And then he went unconscious. The stallion stirred, groaning as he felt his head pounding with a terrible headache. His eyes tried to adjust to his surroundings, trying to make out what was around him. As his senses returned, he noticed that all 4 of his hooves were bounded, latched onto chains, and forcing him to lay back first on a cold, hard stone surface. His body still felt heavy. He lacked any strength to break free. Not that it would matter. His wrists were strapped tightly, and the chains were too short to stretch, leaving him immobile. Speaking of his body, he slowly looked down and noticed the remainder of his clothes, his button shirt and tie, had been completely stripped off, leaving him bare and exposed. The stallion hears a crackle of flames and adjusts his head for a better look. The mare leaned over the fireplace, taking materials out of the pony's suitcase, stuffing them into the burning fire, burning them into pieces. Only when the stallion saw her, she was completely different than before.
I see you're finally awake.
She spoke.
What's going on?
He spoke, somewhat frightened.
Why am I bound up like this?
The answer's simple.
She replied.
Everything you've seen before you was nothing more than an illusion. Let's say I learned it from a rather dear friend of mine. Now that I got what I wanted, the real me stands before you.
It was then the stallion had a good look at his surroundings. The once peaceful-looking house was not as it was. It was much darker, hideous even. No windows, not much furniture, murky and moist from the night air creeping through the single door, and it was like they were in a cave. The hoof steps echo against the stone floor as he slowly looks forward, his body quivering with fear. In what little light there was, the true form of Fluttershy revealed herself. Her cyan eyes were replaced with a brilliant amaranth gaze. Her coat was much darker, grayer, and almost pale as death. Her mane was ruffled, not as smooth as it once appeared, and her dress appeared to have cobwebs along the bottom, with a few tears along the bottom. It was suddenly dawning on him. He was bound before the presence of the Vampony. All the talk from the ponies, all the stories, they were all true, and he was in the middle of one.
I really am thankful for you showing up when you did.
She continued.
It's been ages since I had a decent meal.
Are you going to kill me?
The stallion asked, already knowing the answer.
Oh, you don't have to worry. You won't suffer if that's what you mean. If you're concerned about being tortured and maimed for hours just before I finish you off, well, I wouldn't dare do such a thing. I wouldn't dare hurt some pony. I just expect to get what I want.
Then the Vampony slowly took a hoof toward the top of her dress, which were tied along the back of the neck. She slowly unhooks the gown and allows it to slip off toward the stone floor, leaving her with a stallion's sight on a bare canvas, a piece of art. Then he sees the wings unfold across her back. No longer were they feathery. Now they were thin, with delicate membranes just like a bat. She slowly approaches the silent stallion, grinning as her fangs appear. The stallion watched helplessly as she was within inches of his neck, breathing in whatever musk the stallion had, and lunged her fangs upon his neck for a quick nibble. The stallion gasped, twitching and shaking, but the chains kept him in place. As she tasted his blood, she moans in ecstasy, a hoof caressing the stallion's chest toward his stomach, sipping his blood. She releases, licking the spot along the neck where the punctures remained. And true to her word, the stallion felt no pain at all, just very lightheaded. After a few moments, the stallion turns to the Vampony, and she looks back to him, her eyes showing a sense of wonder.
You have a unique blood type.
She spoke, breaking the silence.
What?
The stallion spoke, mystified.
Oh, my apologies. Allow me to explain myself. Normally, a Vampony such as I would rather suck you bone dry, if only to satisfy our unsatisfying hunger. And that's all it is. Unsatisfying. However, once in a while, there's a rare pony, like you, whose blood is different from the others. And with that special blood, just a small drop is more than enough to satisfy me. Therefore, I have no need to kill you.
You don't?
Of course. Since I'm keeping you alive, you are right to know a few things about me. Aside from my friend I mentioned a while ago, I get very few visitors who show up as you did. Some who do often escape before I get a hold of them. The others were just a means to eat. The fact you happen to carry a special blood type is a bonus. I'll keep you alive and well, so I won't bring any harm to you. I used to get so hungry when no pony would show. I fear I'd die if I didn't find some pony soon. But at the same time, I would feel very weak. So much I wouldn't leave my own home to hunt. So I wait, just as spiders wait for its prey. Now that you're here, I'll never fear going hungry again.
The stallion looked on quietly, not saying a word, just breathing this in. All the while, he watched as her smile grew bigger, folding her arms over herself, and he couldn't help but admiring every inch of her frame.
Don't think I won't compensate you for your contribution. As I said, you'll be taken care of. After all, what kind of pony would I be if I didn't make you feel at home? It does get boring when no pony is around. I'm certain we can think of many ways to keep each other entertained.
On that last word, she placed a hoof underneath his chin, scratching it tenderly, and the pony couldn't help but feel relaxed.
I've always wondered, though, when would my next meal be? Either way, I think it'll be an interesting time for us both. Oh, but where are my manners? Here I am jabbering on, leaving you with little chance to speak. Am I? So please, say what's on your mind.
That was going to be tricky for the stallion. There were a ton of questions flowing through his mind. Far too many, in fact. It would take an eternity to ask them all. Though that isn't saying much. And yet, the very idea of being stuck with this van pony for ages was not a frightful thought. True, she tricked him into being here with every intent to drink him alive. But the one thing those other ponies failed to mention is that she seemed like a really nice mare. Just a lonely soul. Having been around for gosh knows how long, in need of company, there was one question he did have in mind.
If you allow me to live, are you going to make me immortal? Like you?
The van pony raised her eyebrows, seemingly confused by the question.
Why would I want to do that?
She asked.
Because you don't know anything about me, and I don't know anything about you. You don't know where I was born, who my parents were, if I have brothers or sisters, and I didn't even tell you my name.
Does any of it even matter at this time?
Maybe not. But I wouldn't be a pony you would call a saint, if that's the word you are looking for. I've made some mistakes. Many mistakes. But if you were to make me immortal, to give me a new life, then none of that will ever matter. I can even give you what you want. Endless entertainment. Just for you. And you alone.
You make a very tempting proposal. However, I do not have the means to give you what you want. I know only a certain individual who can acquiesce to your request, and he's very difficult to track, even for me.
The stallion seemed rather down at that answer, turning away. But then, he felt his face turn up as the van pony lifted his gaze to hers, a smile on her face.
But that won't be for a while, and we'll have plenty of time to make arrangements. Nothing less. Now be a good, obedient little pony for me. Just lay there, relax, and let me apply some finishing touches. Then we'll discuss preparations for your room.
With nothing more to say, the van pony slid her way atop of the stallion, planting her lips onto his. caressing his frame like a pair of brushes painting a masterpiece. The stallion kissed her back, closing his eyes, at the atmosphere of the dark, murky cavern, turned back into the living room of the house he stumbled upon. The starry night sky looming over the window as the moon shined like the sun in the nights. The stallion did not know how things would go from this point on. On one hoof, he was happy she had no intent to kill him, but on the other, his life would forever be altered. No contact with his friends or family, and an outcast from the outside world. And yet, would that truly be so terrible? He knew all about the life he had up to this point, and all that he mentioned to her. If not most of what he said, he had none. Over the fireplace, as the smoke rose toward the chimney tops, the contents of the papers left sitting in the fire were still burning, fading into ashes like remnants of the old life disappearing. There were many contents sitting by the burning firewood. An eviction notice from his old apartment in Philadelphia, envelopes of bills marked overdue in red, expired train tickets to every city he traveled to, and even a single newspaper from Philadelphia, his face on the front page, and a headline reading the story from a day ago, "Local business pony on the run." Yes, there were many mistakes the pony made in his life, but now that part was over. He was ready for the big change. A smile formed on his face, embracing the new life with her.